Good day, friends of Fuzzy. Oh, wow. So let's figure out what is good and what do we need to mitigate the fear on a little bit. So first of all, these are things that I think are good. So one good COVID thing is that there is a study that had truly randomized controlled about 20 people in each group. So it's still small, but the patients who had chloroquine did not go to the ICU. None of the patients who got it who had chloroquine went to the ICU, and 4 of the patients who were in the control group went to the ICU. So this is still waiting to get reviewed and published, but it does seem possible that there is a way to mitigate some of the severity if chloroquine is given early. So way too early to know, but I've been negative on it because the first study, the people with chloroquine and azithromycin were more likely to die or go to the ICU. It seems like there may be a little hope in the other direction. So let's hold off on that, but that seems positive. I think the other positive thing is that we have some consensus growing across the country that distancing matters. And so one of the big questions is everywhere going to be like New York? Because they're just waiting and they're hanging out with each other and they're spreading the virus, and then they're all going to have this kind of death rate? Or are we able to mitigate it? And so I do think that with Southern Florida, with Kemp in Georgia, there's a lot of different places that may be politically less likely to have taken the virus seriously to begin with. And now everybody except for Texas seems to be getting on board. So if you look at the map that we've been talking about with the U.S. weather for the thermometer readings and the temperatures, they are starting to go up. We've got a little more increased the temperature readings in Texas and some places in Utah. So that's not as good, but at least in general, I think politically we're getting to a consensus that we need to distance. The other thing that's kind of good is I was on Medscape today on their Instagram Live talking about the article that they published about why masks matter. And I am hopeful. There's somebody contacted me because they know a female-owned company that makes cloth and might want to use the design to just mass-produce masks. And these should be pretty easy to make. So I'm hopeful because I think that we will probably get to a culture where in the winter months we're like the Southeast Asian countries where there are ways that we can protect each other, and that may be something that enters our culture. So having the idea that we can make a difference and we can protect each other, that would be fantastic. So those are the good things. All right, the bad things, before we get to pain, fear, and focus, I will say that our curve is worse than any other country's curve. It's worse than Italy's curve. Our deaths are keeping rising. The curve is not slowing down. The new cases are not slowing down. And this has a lot to do with the fact that we know now there's a lot of asymptomatic spread. So because we're not as good at following rules in this country, there's probably a lot of people who have been mingling because they don't have symptoms, and so they're interacting with each other and spreading the disease. So that's not good. It's going to be 2 brutal weeks. I mean, we're still on target for 10,000 deaths by Sunday, and the number by the next week depends on whether we're doubling every 3 days or every 4. But it's something that you can do the math. Take the number of deaths times 1.33 or times 1.25, and then by the number of days, and you can see what exponential spread looks like. So it's going to be scary stuff. I shared early on the information for fear reduction from someone in China who said that what she learned over being quarantined for 7 weeks was that you need to not look at the news very much. You need to appreciate the different things that are happening. Many families that I've talked to are starting to discover each other. They're starting to play games at night. They're starting to do puzzles. They're starting to do creative things like the Les Mis that we shared on yesterday's program. So having time and knowing this is going to last for at least 2 more weeks of quarantine everywhere, if not till the end of April, if not till July, some places are saying. I think we'll be out of this in May. I really do. But knowing that you've got a month to spend with your family, maybe it's time to start learning charades. Maybe you should start looking at different ways you can hang out together. And I do think that that is something positive that's going to come from this. So fear, the way to mitigate fear for today's special trick is don't look at the news. Stay home, but there's really, for the next 10 days, it's going to be grim. There's not much you can do. If you are a small business owner, I'm sure you already know that you can apply starting on Friday to your bank with the payroll average of the past year, the monthly payroll average, and you're eligible for a forgivable loan, which is basically a grant of 2.5 times that salary. So if you haven't heard that yet and you have a small business, it doesn't matter what kind of small business it is, you're probably eligible for 2.5 months of payroll for free. So it's going to be online. Don't go to your bank, but it will be an application process. I know that Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, Chase, there are a number of different banks that are putting this online. So that's also good news if you're a small business owner like us whose volume has gone down. All right, so the next part of our dealing with pain at home, we've got pain, fear, and focus. So the focus part is a really neat website that you can do outside wearing a mask with your children, and it's called inaturalist.org. inaturalist.org. And it has sort of like geocaching things. It has ways that you can go around the woods near you. You can identify what you're seeing. You can upload pictures, and there's a lot of different stuff that's compiled from the National Geographic magazine, which works with them. So there is an app for younger kids called Seek, and it's got badges you can collect, and it's got things like that. So so that's kind of a fun thing. All right, so now the final thing is a cool pain trick. So I was lucky enough to be introduced to some research about the mechanism of heat and cold and its effects on nerves. And so it turns out that the nerves and the pain relief of ice can be greatly amplified if you use heat first. So in our VibraCool pain packs, if you get a Flex, we have one of these cool little heat packs. And the way that the heat pack works is if you've ever been like skiing or something and you have a little hot pack, so you bend the metal thing back and forth when it's got goo, and it will all become hot. The reason this is important, and you could also use, of course, maybe I need to take it out of the package, but the reason this is important is because if you have a place that's really hurting, it turns out that the nerves are going to respond better if you put heat on for about 5 minutes and then put the ice on. That the alpha nerves that are transmitting sharp pain, so A delta nerves, those are impacted by having hot and cold together. And so if you do the heat first, then do the ice, that's better. So it doesn't have to be one of our products, obviously. You can get a hot pack, but if you've got a place that's hurting, or you get somebody else's new thing here, if you've got a place that's hurting, do the hot first and then the cold. I'm giving up on this. Do the hot, and then after that, do the cold. So one of the specific ideas was for some of the different kinds of migraines, rather than using the VibraCool device that we've talked about with ice. So this is the VibraCool for headaches. You put it like that. Then you can actually just use hot held there and then ice if you're having a migraine that's starting. So that's a cool tip. So this concept of it has to be hot or cold, actually juxtaposing the two, and heat first, then cold, is a really nice tip for pain, so it's worth trying. By the way, I just got an update that apparently Texas has signed a stay-at-home order. So see, it's good news. People are learning. This is something we can get through, and everybody's on board together, so that's a great thing. All right. Well, if any of you are manufacturers in the pain space, please send us, partner with us. We've got our Feel Good Labs, we've got our spray, we've got the worm, we've got a bunch of other different coupons, but we're really looking for more ways to partner on our pain care packages. And we will be back again tomorrow, not over the weekend probably, but we'll be back again tomorrow with good news and information to help you deal with fear and pain and focus. Until then, it's going to be fine.